Well, we are at the halfway point, maybe just a little over the Canadian Premier League. So I think it's time to just hand out some grades here and just see where you feel everybody is at as we head down the final stretch, the second half of the season here and into the playoffs. So why don't we begin, Charlie, with the reigning champions and Pacific FC? What grade are you giving them? Mid-season report. Oh, remember when we used to get those mid-season report cards?
Straight
Yeah,
A's.
I don't remember that.
Nothing
Don't
but
remember that
A's.
fondly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was a straight A student too. I'm just saying, but then like you have to like live up to it, and it was like I just wanted to slack off in the second half. Anyways, I know I'm so cocky. All right, mid-season report cards, Charlie, Pacific FC.
So Pacific's kind of a tough one to grade because it feels like there's sort of been two phases of the season. One of which they had Manny Aparicio, and one of them they didn't. But I've gone with a B- on the whole for them. They started the season very well, but they had a lot of home games at the start of the year. I think it was 3 in a row, and then they had this stretch in kind of May and June where I don't think they scored for like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. So these last couple of games, we've seen them completely change the way that they attack. I think it's 3, 6, 10 goals in these last 3 games now, 2 wins. It's been better. It's been better. So maybe if I were to make this judgment in another week or two, I might be pushing a little bit higher, but I'll still go with the B- because that sort of stretch in the middle of season was a tough one for them, and maybe one that where they didn't really look like they had the swagger that they've had at some of their highest moments.
I've got B- as well. I might have to start changing these on the fly just to disagree with Charlie and create some difference here. But I think that's about right. I think like they're probably a little bit worse than you would have expected at this stage of the season in terms of their league position. It's easy to get wrapped up in the last few weeks they've had, which has obviously been a very difficult run. But when you look at it overall, like I said, I think their record is about where you would expect it to be. Maybe not quite as high given the strength of the starting lineup they came into the season with, but still in the playoff picture and not far off the top of the table. It's tough, right? We're seeing that it's tough when you have a coach like Pamadou Carr, who is such a big figure for this team and was last season. Someone the players obviously had massive trust and faith in. And I think those are very difficult shoes to fill for James Merriman, who is a very capable young coach in his own right, and making his own way here. But succeeding someone like that, whether you're experienced, whether you're coming into your first job in management, is never easy. And there's going to be ups and downs. And, I think if there's one thing you're optimistic about if you're a Pacific fan, is that it's happening now, right? And not, at the end of the season when it matters. And hopefully they can work through these things and be a better team for it.
Perennial contenders, Cavalry FC. We wonder if this could be their year. But at the midway point, Ollie, what are you giving them? What's their grade?
A-. Very good season from Cavalry once again, but you have to say that we're always going to judge Cavalry at this stage on what they do at the end of the season, right? Yeah. And how they finish it. So you don't want to not give them credit for the way they're playing right now. They've been absolutely excellent. The best team in the league, probably, when you look at, the top of the table. So when you look at the season as a whole, but we just want to see them take that next step and be that force come playoff time as they have been in the regular season. And that's going to be one where you look at the teams around them and with Forge in particular, that where they are now probably isn't going to be where they are at the end of the season. They're going to get Critson back. They're going to have a stronger defense in general. Bobby always builds the team up in a way that it peaks usually at the end of the year. That, I think, is the challenge for Cavalry, is finding a way to take this already excellent team and take it to another level when it matters most. And that's something where you lose Arab and Peppel, but there's still maybe that question about, are they going to be able to score enough goals when it comes to crunch time? We know they can do it from set pieces. We know they're a good team from open play. Can they take that next step and be a real prolific team up front?
Yeah, I've given them the full A. I think that I've, first of all, been so impressed with the way that the team's kind of rolled with the punches. Just that massive list of injuries at the start of the season. Anthony Novak, Tom Field, now Fraser Aird, Joe Mason's missed a lot of games. Meyer Bevan started scoring and suddenly he's out of the lineup. And the way that they're able to cope with that and still be probably the best team in the league on form so far, the way that they're able to destroy teams on set pieces pretty much every week has been so impressive. So I'll go with an A for Cavalry, but as Ollie said, even they won't be judging themselves until October, because that's really all that matters for this team.
Sorry, I don't mean to be a distraction. I'm fighting off a puppy. She wants to get in on the grading, gentlemen. She's like,
Stop
oh,
fighting, let her in.
I know. I judge her all the time. So she's like, maybe it's my turn to judge people. That's what she wants to do because we're going to stay in Alberta here and we're going to look at Alan Koch and FC Edmonton. I'll go back to you, Charlie. What grade are you giving them?
It feels harsh or mean, but I've gone with C+ for this team. It's hard to get out of the C's if you are still at the bottom of the table, but I have been very impressed with what they've done this season. Obviously, we all know the restrictions on FC Edmonton, the kind of financial difficulties that club is having, and what they've had in terms of having to build their squad basically through trialists and loanees. But at the end of the day, they haven't won away from home. They still sit at the bottom of the table, but there is a lot of hope in that team, and I think C+ feels about right for this team. They've had some really big moments, some really kind of sentimental moments, really, for lack of a better term, with Toby Warszewski's bicycle kick or that first win against Ottawa, and then they destroyed York at home, which was shocking, but very impressive from them. So again, it's a very difficult season for Edmonton, and a lot of players who are kind of first-time professionals are very young, and they're trying to basically learn the professional game on the fly. So that there's been a lot of things that are impressive about Alan Koch's team, but again, we don't want to give them too much of a leg up on the other teams because they're still ultimately judged next to their peers.
I'm going to be a bit more generous. I'm going to take the approach that my parents had to my grades, which is expectations are rock bottom, but they're holding their own in a way that might surprise you. So I'm going to give them a solid B.
Okay.
I just don't know. I know they're bottom of the league. I know they've conceded the most goals, only won a couple of games. So I can see where Charlie is coming from, but I just don't know what more you could really expect from this FC Edmonton team, right? Like they're at such a disadvantage compared to the rest of the league. They're competitive in nearly every game. They've had a couple of bad days, but other than that, they're holding their own pretty much every week. They're finding some genuinely exciting players in Bitar and Timoteo, players who I think can have a long careers in this league, or if not higher. There's overall like a better feeling around the club. Like you wouldn't have expected that for a club that doesn't have any ownership and is at the disadvantages they have. But I feel like there's more of a feel-good factor at that place than there has been at any point in the CPL. So I'm feeling good about FC Edmonton and really admire the job Alan Koch is doing. So I'll give him a solid B.
All right. Well, we just finished talking about Valour FC. We know they're going to be losing a big player in William Akio. So what grade, but that doesn't matter because we'll see what happens in the second half. This is all about the first half, right, Ollie? So when you're grading Valour, what are you giving them?
B-. Still think there's a bit more to come from this team. I think, look, with Valour compared to Halifax, and I've graded Halifax a bit lower as a result, there's more belief, I think, and more optimism that this team could put together a run. Obviously, they have put together a run to a certain extent over the last few weeks. Could be a playoff team. On their day, they can beat anyone. With Andrew Jean-Baptiste back, as we talked about so many times, they do look like a different side. So I think there is real optimism probably among Valour fans that they could be in the top four this season. I still just think if I have to pick a team that's on the outside looking in, it's probably still Valour as of right now, just because I don't think they cope as well when they have one or two key players out injured. And obviously we'll see with Akio how that impacts them now. So they're there or thereabouts. They're in the right kind of form right now, but still need to see a little bit more, I think, to really believe that this is going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of that. I don't think Valour is in my kind of predicted top four at the moment. They're just on the outside. I think I'm the mean teacher today, though, because I've gone with a C+ for Valour, which, it feels a little bit harsh looking at the current run of form with these 3 wins in a row. That road trip to Ontario, where they won both games, was obviously very impressive. But then you look back at other moments in this season where they just haven't been very good at home. I think before they beat Halifax last weekend, they had like 4 points from, I think, 5 home games, which just isn't really good enough in the CPL. You have to win your home games, I think, to really be a top 4 team. And that's something that Phil DeSantis himself would tell you. He was very, very upset with especially that 3-game homestand where I think they had 1 point out of it, and that was against Edmonton. They had to score in like the 95th minute. So I've gone with the C+. There's a lot of room for improvement in this team. You want to see them maybe hold on to the ball a little bit more and evolve a bit more as a team. But at the moment, they're about middle of the pack.
Oh my goodness, guys. I am so sorry. Now we have about 4 minutes here. We're gonna whip
She
through
wants
it.
to give some grades.
Ginger wants to agree.
Let her in.
She wants to know, Charlie, what you think of Forge.
Yeah, Forge, they're a tough one to grade as well because my expectations for them are so high. I've given them a B. I think that we maybe didn't realize just how much turnover there actually was in his team compared to last year. There's a lot of new faces, especially because of how many injuries they've had at the back. Um, but since Rizart Ramos come in and right back, Abu Sissoko has been fantastic in midfield. So we've had moments where they look like Forge, and then we've had weird moments like that home game against Valour or the game against Atletico Ottawa, where they just don't necessarily look quite like the dominant Forge, the lethal Forge in the final third that I think we've come to expect.
B plus for me. I don't really worry about those 2 home games they drop too much because I just think that those classic difficult games where a team comes and sets up pretty deep and defends well, and those are traps, I think, for any team in the Canadian Premier League. Like I just think we don't have teams with the kind of overwhelming attacking firepower to deal with that very well. So it's tough. They'll probably have to deal with that come playoff time. So that's something that they need to get better at approaching. But I still think with this Forge team, by and large, they've played very, very good football. I think at their best, they look as good as, if not better than anyone else in the league still. And they've done it all without having a natural defender on the pitch at times this season, which I think makes it all the more impressive.
Let's fly through this. York, Ollie, your grade on them.
D. It's just been a miserable season, right? Like I think I said before, I think they've got some key players that have been missing, and I just don't think that the squad was prepared in a way that they have been able to deal with that. And when you look at Petrasso and Thompson and some of these guys that have been out, I don't think it was all that unpredictable that at some point they would get injured, because that's what their track record as players suggests, unfortunately. And I just don't think that, Martin Nash has been adequately equipped with the kind of replacement players to come in and fill those spots, and they've struggled as a result.
Yeah, D plus for me. That's 10 games without a win now. Earlier in that run, it's maybe a little bit okay because you're still defending very well, even if you're not scoring. But these last few games, they've been trying to get more into the attacking third, but they've sacrificed a lot of the defensive solidity because of it. So it's a massive concern, as Ollie mentioned. There's lots of players missing, but still, D plus.
Yeah. Back to you, Charlie, with Ottawa.
Ottawa's an A minus, I think, for me. They've been easily the most improved team in the league this year under Carlos Gonzalez. Ollie Bassett's one of the best players in the league at the moment. They're just so well organized, so hard to break down, and I've been very impressed with the progress that they've made this year.
A for me. Gone from last place to looking like a pretty solid playoff contender right now. I don't think you can ask for much more than that in terms of a turnaround. The only thing keeping it back from being an A plus is that they do need those under 21 minutes, which I think is going to be interesting for them in the second half of the season.
Halifax, Ollie.
Halifax is a C minus, and I know people will say, well, how can they be that much lower than, a full grade lower than Valour? But I struggle to feel like real confidence that Halifax is going to be a playoff team this season. They struggle to score goals from open play still. They haven't won back-to-back games. They just really, continue to struggle to get any kind of momentum that makes you feel like this team can be in that top 4. So it's been another disappointing season for me.
Yeah, I've given him a C. You maybe want to use the fact that Joao Morelli got hurt right at the start of the season as an excuse, but for me, it's not an excuse. It just shows how dependent they were on him last season.
Yeah.
Midfield has still been a bright spot for this team, as it always will be at Rampersad and Gagnon Lapare, but as Ollie said, they're just not scoring enough goals. There's just not enough excitement in this team at the moment for me.